Their police advisory team were visiting the checkpoint in order to conduct a shura and training. As they were leaving, they were engaged by small arms fire by a man wearing an Afghan police uniform. During the exchange of fire, the 3 soldiers were wounded, and despite receiving first aid at the scene, subsequently died of their wounds. Their loss will be felt deeply across the task force. However, this will be nothing compared to the grief experienced by their families at home. Our thoughts and prayers are with them at this extremely difficult time.
Speaking in the House of Commons this afternoon, Prime Minister David Cameron paid tribute to the 3 soldiers and condemned the attack.
I'm sure that, like me, the whole House will be deeply saddened by the death of 3 British servicemen in Afghanistan yesterday. These brave soldiers were demonstrating great courage to prevent Afghanistan once again becoming a haven for international terrorists, and therefore were helping to keep us safe here in the UK. The suspected perpetrator is in custody, and we will do everything in our power with the Afghan National Security Forces to ensure that justice is done. This tragic incident again demonstrates the very real risks that our soldiers face every day, and we will learn all the lessons that arise from it. I know that everyone in this House will want to send their support to our brave troops and their families at this difficult time.
Well, Simon Newton joins me from Camp Bastion now. Simon, clearly this is another huge blow, but presumably it won't change the mission to train Afghan soldiers and police, which is, of course, the linchpin of NATO's exit strategy come 2014.
It is, very much so, and the line really from NATO, ISAF and from the Defence Secretary Philip Hammond today is that this will not derail the mission, however tragic an incident it is. And the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir David Richards, who of course was only here last week, issued a statement today saying that the resolve of those in operations will remain unshaken and that progress is being made despite these terrible incidents. And he went on to say that attacks like this will not stop us from moving forward. But of course this is the 7th green on blue this year. That's a quarter of all British casualties in 2012. And my colleague Charlotte Cross now looks back at the background to this incident.
Green on blue is an increasingly familiar term, used to describe an incident where ISAF troops are attacked by the Afghan security forces they work with. It's so called because of the colours representing Afghan green and NATO blue forces. The latest deaths bring the total of British personnel killed by their supposed Afghan allies to 15 in the last 3 years. The first shocking attack was in 2009, when 5 Grenadier Guards were gunned down by an Afghan policeman at their checkpoint in Nahr-e-Saraj. The following year, 3 soldiers from the Royal Gurkha Rifles were killed by an Afghan soldier at their patrol base in Nahr-e-Saraj. This March, an Afghan army soldier shot dead 2 British soldiers at the entrance to the UK headquarters in Lashkar. Just weeks later in May, 2 UK personnel were shot dead by men wearing Afghan police uniforms. Other nations serving in Afghanistan have also suffered such attacks. So far this year, across ISAF, there have been 26 green on blue deaths, mostly Americans. The Taliban often claim responsibility, but the cause goes much deeper than that. Problems with leadership, pay and conditions have been blamed for dissatisfaction among the Afghan ranks, with the Afghan police facing more criticism than the army, accused of being corrupt, lazy and addicted to marijuana and opium. Clashes between British troops and their Afghan counterparts over expected standards and behaviour have been reported. Stricter vetting procedures have been implemented to mitigate infiltration of Afghan security forces by the Taliban.
They include strengthened screening processes, but also education, both education of Afghan security forces and ISAF troops, with a view to prevent such incidents in the future.
If cultural differences and innate levels of corruption are also to blame, they will be much harder to detect and overcome. It's common for Afghans to switch sides depending on who offers the bigger bribe. Whatever the cause, green on blue incidents are tragically common as the role of ISAF combat troops shifts more towards mentoring the swelling ranks of the Afghan security forces. The issue of trust will be of increasing concern to commanders on the ground. Charlotte Cross, Forces News.
Simon, how much damage will this latest incident have done to the trust between British soldiers and the Afghans, which is, of course, so vital?
Well, ISAF always stress that these incidents, however tragic, are really quite rare, given that there are about 350,000 members of the Afghan National Security Forces now deployed. And in that statement today, Sir David Richards said that generally there remains a high level of trust, but that word generally is very telling. If you talk to troops on the ground out here, they seem to have a very high regard for the Afghan National Army, but when it comes to the police, it's much less so. We've been to shuras with troops here, some of which they've taken off their body armour, sat down, taken tea with the police, seemed very much at ease. At others, it's been completely different, a very different atmosphere. We've been told to keep our body armour on, and we've been watched over by an armed soldier at all times. Now, we don't know whether this was actually an Afghan policeman who carried out this attack or an insurgent in disguise. It seems to be, the indications are that it's the former. But this issue of trust is very much key, particularly as we see the drawdown of troops as we move towards 2014, when we're going to need, and these troops on the ground are going to need, far more trust, not less.